Good evening and welcome to Healing Bedtime Stories. You're here with me now, a safe, gentle corner to rest, breathe, and feel at home. My name is Julia, and tonight I'll be right here beside you, like a quiet friend, helping you drift into calm sleep and the soft comfort of simple kindness. Maybe today felt long. Maybe it asked a lot from you. Or maybe there's a little heaviness on your chest you can't name yet. So before we begin our story tonight, let's give your heart a small pause, a kind pause just for you. Take a slow breath in and an even softer breath out. Let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Feel your bed or your blanket hold you gently, like a warm nest at the end of a long day. Inhale calm. Exhale worry. Inhale warmth. Exhale all the noise. You are safe here. You are enough here. This quiet moment belongs to you. Tonight's story is a tender one about an old man named Henry, a teacher named James, and a simple pair of red mittens that carried kindness through the cold. It's about how even the smallest warm act can light up a house, soften a heart, and remind someone that they're never truly alone. So stay close with me now. Let this gentle story carry you toward rest. And if you drift off halfway through, that's perfectly okay. That just means the story found its way into your dreams, keeping you warm while you sleep. So get cozy, breathe easy, and let's begin the Red Mittens. May this story remind you that even the smallest kindness can warm the coldest winter, and that somewhere out there, someone is grateful for the light you bring just by being here. You are not alone. You are part of this gentle story too. So rest well tonight, and if this little story brings you comfort, don't forget to subscribe. Your presence is the warmest gift I could hope for. Far in the north of America lies a small town called Willow Creek, deep in the state of Minnesota. This little town lies deep in the mountains. For many months in winter, Willow Creek is covered in white snow. Every morning, the town looks like it is wrapped in a cold, soft blanket. The houses sit quietly under the snow. Thin smoke rises slowly from a few chimneys that still have fire inside. The streets are empty and quiet. Sometimes you can see the footprints of a squirrel or a stray cat on the snow. In Willow Creek, winter is not just weather, it is a part of life. It fills every breath, every step, and every quiet look from the window. James Whitmore is 26 years old. He is a young teacher, just out of university. He grew up in the suburbs in Southern Virginia, a place where snow is rare and winter feels like just a passing wind. When James got his first job as an art teacher at Willow Creek Elementary School, he felt excited but also a little afraid. He knew he was going to a place that was far away, colder, lonelier, and quieter than anywhere he had lived before. James moved to Willow Creek in early December. It was the beginning of the first heavy snow. The snow covered the rooftops, the pine forests, and the old stone steps leading to the school where he would teach. He rented a small wooden house just a few streets away from the school. It was a simple place, with a red brick fireplace and a window looking out at bare trees, slowly disappearing into the gray winter. In his first days, James liked to walk around the town. He visited the small grocery store, the public library that opened only 3 days a week, and the only cafe in town. The cafe had warm apple pie that smelled so good. The people in Willow Creek were friendly but shy. They were like the snowflakes, beautiful and gentle, but they needed time to melt and open their hearts. In Class 3B, where James were teaching, the children quickly liked him. He was kind and calm. His art lessons were full of color. The children could paint, shape clay, and tell stories about their world in their own way. For James, art was not just a lesson. It was a bridge to the hearts of the children. It was a small light that shone through the long, cold winter. And there, in that small snow-covered school, between the laughter in class and the long, silent afternoons, James slowly understood that the winter in Willow Creek was not cold only because of the weather. It was also cold because some people here were quietly living their days alone. And one of those people was the old man who lived next door to James's small wooden house. Every afternoon after school, when the snow began to thin under the soft amber sunset, James walked home slowly. He passed the narrow street lined with bare trees that led to his small wooden house. But there was always one stop in his mind. An old house with a faded red roof and dusty window frames touched by time. In that window, an old man always sat in the same place, as if time had stopped for him. James did not know his name, but seeing him there every day made James notice him more and more. Through the thin glass covered in mist, James saw his small, thin shape in a dark sweater, with white hair and a faraway look in his eyes, as if he was searching for something long lost. The old man's dinner was always simple. One plate placed neatly on a small round table. There were no voices, no laughter, and no other chair pulled out across from him. Just him and the soft sound of his fork and spoon. Like a sad song only he could hear. James started to watch him more closely. Early every morning, the old man came outside to sweep the snow from his front steps with an old wooden broom. He did it slowly, as if he was caring for something precious that nobody else saw anymore. On days when freezing rain fell, the old man did not come outside, but the warm yellow light still shone through his window, as if he did not want the world to forget that someone still lived there. The man had a strange but steady routine. After his quiet breakfast, he sat by the kitchen table to read the newspaper. Then he spent hours taking care of a few small plants by the window, some ivy and a pot of geraniums that looked tired and dry. Sometimes he knitted scarves that nobody ever seemed to wear. Other times, he just sat by the window, a cup of tea growing cold beside him, his eyes looking out at the wide white yard covered in snow. James often wondered, what was he thinking about? The old man's eyes were not empty, but they were not clear either. It felt like they held a very long story, too long to be told in words. A memory, a lost love, a quiet hope, or maybe just a habit to not forget himself. James felt confused and a little sad. For young people like him, it was hard to sit still for even 10 minutes without picking up a phone. The phone was like a third hand, always connected, always catching up with the world, scrolling and tapping to escape the feeling of being left alone. Many people could not stand silence or emptiness or the quiet when there were no new messages on the screen. But the man could sit there for hours, day after day, with no phone, no text, no one calling his name, just him and a silence full of unspoken questions. This made James feel something heavy in his chest. It was not pity. It was something deeper, because his quiet presence was so real and so raw that James had to look at himself. This man had once lived, once loved, once laughed out loud. But now all that remained was the sound of the wind on the roof and the slow ticking of a clock in an empty kitchen. One day, James asked some older teachers at school and learned that the old man's name was Henry. Long ago, he was a well-known clockmaker in town. He had fixed hundreds of old clocks for over 40 years. He lived with his wife for half his life, but they had no children. She was his whole world, but she passed away 2 years ago from heart disease. And since then, Mr. Henry had hardly ever left town. His family lived far away. They only called on holidays. They were also old now. One cold Saturday afternoon, the snow was heavier than usual. James went outside to take out the trash and saw Mr. Henry trying to pick up a piece of paper blown out of his mailbox. He bent down slowly, his hands shaking in the cold. His old knitted gloves were worn out, with threads coming loose at the thumb. James wanted to run over and help, but Mr. Henry stood up by himself, gave a small, tired smile to no one, and went back inside. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody said hello. Nobody called his name. That image stayed in James's mind all evening. In his next art classes, when the children drew winter pictures, snow falling, families sitting warm by the fireplace, grandparents wrapped in soft scarves, James kept seeing Mr. Henry in his mind, like a missing piece that did not fit in the happy picture. Mr. Henry had no one to wrap a scarf around his neck. No one made him hot chocolate. No one said, "I miss you, Grandpa," at Christmas. There was something about the way Mr. Henry looked out the window every day, like he was waiting for something without a name, and that made James's heart ache. It was not just simple sadness. It was a deep, quiet loneliness that lasted through each cold day and each silent night, soaking into every breath, every dream, every soft tick of the clock. The same old clocks he had fixed all his life, now ticking only for him to hear. James knew there were many old people living alone, but something about Mr. Henry, the way he kept his steps clean of snow, the way he turned on the warm light every evening, the way he wiped the window glass even though nobody came to visit, made James believe that Mr. Henry was still waiting for something kind from the world. And maybe, James thought, it was time for someone to answer that waiting. Project Mailbox started on a quiet afternoon when snow was falling softly. James looked out the classroom window and saw Mr. Henry sitting alone by his window across the street. The warm yellow light behind him looked dim, and his small shadow seemed to melt into the gray of the winter evening. James wondered, what can I do so he knows that somewhere out there, someone still cares? That day, during art class, while the kids were busy coloring, James sat down beside one of their small tables. He gently told them about the old man who lived alone across the street, the white-haired man who sat by his window every day. James shared his honest worry. Have any of you ever seen him? To his surprise, many tiny hands shot up at once. A little blonde girl said softly, "I know him. Every morning when my dad drives me to school, I see him sweeping the snow in front of his house. His hands shake just like my grandpa's." Another boy asked with wide eyes, "But teacher, he always looks so sad. My friend said he lives alone. If he gets sick, who will cook soup for him?" Then a quiet voice spoke up from the back. "Maybe we can give him a puppy so he won't be alone. The puppy can sleep on his feet and keep him warm." Their simple words made James fall silent. He realized that children's eyes could see things adults often missed. The loneliness hiding on snowy steps, behind windows that glowed but covered only one life inside. James bent down and gently patted the head of the boy at the first desk. "That's a sweet idea. But before we give him a puppy, maybe we can do something small first, just so he knows we are thinking of him." A girl's eyes lit up as she raised her hand. "We can draw him pictures, teacher." Another child added quickly. "Or I can bring him cookies. My mom makes really good ginger cookies." James smiled. He felt his chest warm up in the middle of the long, cold winter. He looked at the children. Their eyes shone like tiny snowflakes that had not yet melted. "All right, we'll do it together. Every week, our class will send him a small gift. We won't write our names. We won't tell him who sent it. We just want him to know that somewhere out there, someone remembers him and he still matters to us." And so, Project Mailbox was born, starting with children's voices in a small classroom, then crossing the snowy street, reaching the silent house, and knocking softly on the lonely heart of an old man carrying the warmth and love from many little hands. The first gift was a pair of red wool mittens. James chose red because he thought it would look bright and warm on Mr. Henry's old, rough hands. Hands that had spent years fixing tiny clock parts, and now still swept snow from his front steps every cold morning. That evening, as cold wind slipped through the door cracks, Mr. Henry, as usual, slowly walked out to check his old wooden mailbox by the porch. The truth was, he never really expected much. No letters, no more Christmas cards like before. And the few phone calls from distant cousins only came on holidays when people felt they had to remember. Mostly, he opened the mailbox just to collect old flyers and supermarket ads, stacking them neatly so the box never looked messy. This small habit was his quiet way of showing the world, someone still lives here. This house is not empty yet. But today, something was different. Inside the box was a small brown paper bag tied with a thin string. He picked it up. His old hand paused for a moment, almost afraid he was imagining it. For who? Who sent this? He turned the bag over and saw a few words written in black marker. "To Mr. Henry." He stood still. To me, that's strange. Who would send me a gift? He looked around his small, snowy yard. Only the wind answered back, and the quick steps of a stray cat crossed the porch. Mr. Henry brought the bag inside and placed it on the wooden table next to his old teapot. He slowly untied the string, his hands shaking a little, maybe from the cold, or maybe from something like hope that he could not tell. Inside was a pair of red wool mittens, brand new, with the soft smell of fresh yarn. Who could it be, he wondered? A distant relative? An old friend who still remembers me? Or maybe someone sent it to the wrong house. Little thoughts like this drifted through his mind and faded away like a warm breath in cold air. Then he touched the mittens. The wool felt soft and warm on his dry skin, the red so bright under his old yellow lamp. He gave a small smile, so small, like he was afraid it would break the quiet night. He slipped the mittens on. They were a little big, but they covered his thin, cold fingers well enough. He held his hands up to the light, looking at the strange, bright red against his wrinkled skin. Inside his chest, a tiny, warm feeling woke up, like a thin red thread running through his cold fingers, reminding him that somewhere out there, someone still thought of him. Maybe they didn't show their face, but they gave him this little warmth anyway. That night, Mr. Henry made a cup of tea. Steam curled on the cold window. He sat in his old chair, the red mittens resting on the table. Now and then, he glanced at them, then at the snow outside. How long since my last gift? He wondered, fingers brushing the soft wool. Who was kind enough to leave this for me? Outside, the wind blew over the roof, but inside, a small warmth flickered, enough to heat his hands, and a quiet corner of his heart long left cold. A week passed after the red mittens. Mr. Henry slowly got used to walking outside every cold evening, brushing off the thin snow on his porch, and then checking his old wooden mailbox. He didn't hope for much. Maybe the mittens were just a sweet mistake, or someone's small kindness that wouldn't come again. But deep inside, a small corner of his heart waited, just a little. On Saturday afternoon, snow fell like soft sugar on the roof. Mr. Henry opened the mailbox with shaky hands, and his heart paused for a moment. Inside was not a brown paper bag this time, but a clear glass jar tied with a red ribbon. Inside the jar were golden ginger cookies, smelling sweet and warm like Christmas from long ago. Tucked under the ribbon was a small card, cream paper, with a child's simple handwriting. "Winter is sweeter with you in it." Mr. Henry touched the lid of the jar, feeling even more puzzled than last week. Who was this? Who knew he loved ginger cookies, the same cookies his wife used to bake every winter? When the kitchen was warm and smelled of butter and cinnamon, he pressed his lips together. The old wooden floor creaked under his feet, pulling him back to the quiet house. He carried the jar inside, placing it carefully on his kitchen table. The room was still, only the old clock he once repaired ticked softly on the wall. He sat down, opened the lid. The smell of ginger and sweet butter filled the air, waking up a soft, fragile memory inside him. He broke off a small piece of cookie and tasted it slowly, feeling the warmth spread down his throat and touch his chest that had known so many long, cold winters. It had been so long, maybe 2 Christmases already, since he had baked cookies himself. The kitchen was cold, his hands too shaky, and there was no one to share them with. But today, inside this small glass jar, the old kitchen seemed to come back, the laughter, the clinking spoons, the kettle singing on the stove. Gently, he closed the lid again, afraid the cookies would lose their sweet smell too soon. He placed his hand on the tiny note, the letters like chalk lines from a child's hand. "Winter is sweeter with you in it." Who thought that? Who left that sentence sitting so quietly in his old mailbox that he still swept clear every morning? That night, Mr. Henry made himself a cup of tea. He looked at the jar of cookies next to his old teapot. The yellow lamp shone through the glass, making it glow like a tiny fire. He picked up a cookie, but put it back down. He didn't want the warmth to end too soon. Outside, the cold wind blew through bare trees and over the old roof. But inside, the sweet smell of ginger filled his small kitchen and made it feel less lonely. Deep in his heart, a small hope began to grow. Tomorrow, next week, will someone still remember me? By the 3rd week, Mr. Henry was already used to this strange, gentle hope each afternoon. He didn't check the mailbox just for old flyers anymore. Even though he told himself not to expect much, a soft beat in his chest whispered, "Maybe today. Maybe there will be something again." That Friday, snow fell early. The roof and steps were covered in white. Mr. Henry put on his thick sweater and stepped out. His thin hand lifted the old mailbox lid. His heart skipped when he found a piece of blue paper inside, the corner a bit wet from the snow. It wasn't cookies or an expensive gift. Just a simple drawing on white paper. Crayon colors a bit messy, but so sweet. His small wooden house in winter. Warm yellow light from the window, and inside, an old man with white hair looking out at the falling snow. At the bottom, there were small, shaky words. "I hope you stay warm. Don't be sad. Winter will pass. Thank you for cleaning the snow for us." Mr. Henry stood under the porch, his breath mixing with the cold air. For a second, he thought he heard children's laughter in the wind. He brought the drawing inside, placed it on his tea table, and looked at every line like he was holding each child's tiny wish in his hands. He made a new pot of tea, set the drawing up beside it, and let the warm light shine on it. That night, while the wind howled outside, Mr. Henry sat for a long time looking at the drawing, feeling the warm tea in his hands, and letting his heart soak in the small wishes, like a piece of spring softly covering the cold inside him. One morning, soft snow fell like silver dust, covering the old porch steps in white. Mr. Henry pulled on his worn sweater and stepped outside. This old habit of checking the mailbox had slowly turned into something new: hope. Inside the faded wooden box, there was no cookie, no drawing this time, but a thick envelope. The paper still damp and cold from the winter air. His hands trembled as he gently tore open the flap. Inside was a letter, each line written neatly, carefully, as if someone had sat a long time to gather every word they wanted to say. It was from James, the young art teacher who lived nearby, and it held a message Mr. Henry had never dared to dream of. "Dear Mr. Henry, I'm James, the art teacher at the elementary school near your house. The small gifts you've found these past few weeks came from my class. The children said this winter shouldn't be only wind and cold. It should have something warm for you to keep too. I hope you know every warm yellow light you turn on each night is also a gift for us. It tells us there is someone inside that old house, someone who has been here so long, patiently keeping the clock of this neighborhood ticking. If one day you'd like to visit, our classroom door is always open. The kids would love nothing more than to draw with you." When he read those lines, Mr. Henry's eyes stung with tears. He folded the letter and laid it carefully on his knee, then looked out at the garden covered in pale winter mist. This time, he didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. He didn't try to hide the softness in his chest. He just sat there for a long while, the warm red mittens resting in his hands. The old drawing lay gently across his lap, all of it touching memories that had been cold for so long. The shape of his gentle wife moving through a kitchen scented with baking. The nights he bent under a small lamp fixing tiny clock gears, making sure time never missed a beat for this quiet street. And now, he understood what he still carried was never just old clocks and ticking hands. It was the small, stubborn warmth people passed to each other, even when the longest winter wraps the whole town in snow. On Monday morning, the schoolyard was all white with fresh snow. Soft snowflakes fell on the rooftops. Inside the small art classroom, James was busy arranging paint and brushes for his lesson when the door slowly opened. Mr. Henry stood at the door. He wore his old wool scarf around his neck and held a small wicker basket covered with a red checkered cloth. When James looked up, Mr. Henry paused for a second, then smiled and slowly stepped in. He walked up to James and suddenly gave him a warm, gentle hug. His voice was rough but full of warmth, like a fireplace in winter. "Thank you, James. I never thought this winter would feel so warm for me." The children looked at each other, surprised. Then their eyes lit up when they saw Mr. Henry carefully place the basket on the table. Inside were rows of chocolate brownies, soft, square pieces he had baked early that morning. He had turned on his old oven, sifted the flour, measured the milk, and cracked the eggs with his shaky old hands. Long ago, every winter, he used to bake these brownies to share with his wife. They would sit by the warm teapot, enjoying the sweet taste together while snow covered the porch outside. Each brownie was wrapped neatly in wax paper, tied with a tiny ribbon. Each one seemed to whisper, "Thank you for bringing spring back to me." Mr. Henry spoke, his voice trembling a little, but his eyes shining softly. "I don't have much, just these brownies, to say thank you for letting me feel remembered and loved one more time." The children clapped their hands all at once. Their happy giggles filled the room, and James couldn't hide his warm smile either. The sweet smell of chocolate spread through the small classroom, filling it with cozy warmth that chased away the cold winter air outside the frosty window. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside that small classroom, something warm and gentle would stay with Mr. Henry forever. Thank you for spending this moment with me. I hope you sleep well tonight, and if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Your subscription is the greatest encouragement for me to keep telling warm stories like this.